Welcome to the Aegis Interactive and Business Mobility Asia Covid-19 Business Travel and Investigations Update for 26th of February 2021. This week I'm on day 9 of 14 days hotel quarantine back in Singapore. This means not leaving the room for anything at any time for any reason unless told to do so and escorted by security. I also have to report my temperature and general health to the Ministry of Health 3 times a day and take calls from them to confirm that I'm still here in the room. All this, of course, is for my own benefit and to keep the rest of Singapore healthy and COVID-free. This is what COVID normal travel is likely to be for some time, with quarantine, PCR tests, checkups, vaccine or no vaccine. This is what it's going to be. So let's get on with the update. For most countries, citizens and residents of all those countries can enter. That is, if they can get a flight, which is limited in some cases. But we'll be looking at what foreigners and visitors can do in China and across Southeast Asia. China has COVID under control and has done for some time. It has some reciprocal green lane arrangements with other countries, and APEC card entry is possible only for residents of Japan, Brunei and Singapore. Other visas are very limited. Quarantine is for 14 to 21 days. Reciprocal green lane travellers do not have to serve quarantine. Business-wise, China is more or less operating normally. We've been able to continue providing due diligence services to clients for China-related matters, but field investigations continue to be off limits. During COVID, we've been working on developing new digital platforms for access to China-related data. Vietnam continues to do well containing COVID-19, despite a small spike in cases recently. Entry is very limited. There are no reciprocal green lanes and the APEC card currently is not accepted. There are some very limited visa categories for Vietnam and 14 days quarantine is required by everybody. There's no domestic restrictions in Vietnam and businesses operating normally with no work from home requirement. We just finished a matter in Vietnam with our associates over there and achieved a great result for our client. Malaysia is not dealing with COVID well, and the high number of new cases continues to cause concern. Visas are not being issued for Malaysia and APEC cards currently cannot be used. Quarantine, if you can enter, is 7 to 10 days, and Malaysia still has a MCO or movement control order in place. Interstate and inter-district travel is mostly prohibited across Malaysia, but the rules differ from state to state and region to region, which makes the movement even more complicated. Essentially, you're not going to be going many places. It's most definitely not business as usual in Malaysia, although there is no work from home ruling. Employers are encouraged to allow it as much as possible. Singapore, where I am today, continues also to manage COVID well, with almost no new cases other than those found in quarantine. There are no visas being issued other than for family reunion or medical matters. The APEC card is currently not accepted. All long-term pass holders, like me, must apply to the ICA for permission to enter. The exceptions are travellers from China and Malaysia with special work access agreements, and anyone travelling from Australia, Brunei, New Zealand, Taiwan and Vietnam who can register for the ICA Safe Travel Pass to come to Singapore and can do so without quarantine, mostly. Work from home is no longer a requirement in Singapore, and almost all businesses and commercial activities are operating normally. Indonesia has done little in efforts to curb COVID-19, with new cases still coming in at around 10,000 per day and also 200 deaths, which is most unfortunate. Certain limited types of visas and APEC card holders may enter, but these rules change and have done so multiple times and could change again. The immigration website in Indonesia has very good updates, although it might be a day or two out of date. Quarantine is only 5 days. Now, I just returned from 2 months at home in Jakarta with my family, and I was able to execute a couple of client matters with the team while I was there. The PSSB, as it's called, COVID restrictions limited us a little, but mostly we're able to satisfy the client's needs and achieve some good results. And Indonesia is still in the PSSB stroke lockdown mode, whereby work from home is recommended and commercial premises are restricted to about 25% capacity. However, from observation, overall, the businesses are coping quite well and there's ongoing access to government services. Thailand has generally managed COVID well, despite occasional spikes. Entry to Thailand is only possible for holders of special tourist visas and APEC card holders coming from certain countries. Anyone entering Thailand has to do 14 days quarantine. No other visas are being issued. There's a few limitations of movement around Thailand, so more or less business as usual. Talking to our friends and associates in Thailand and Bangkok, they seem to be busier than they have been for some time. The Philippines are still struggling to contain COVID. There's no normal visas for Philippines, but basically for humanitarian reasons and returning Filipinos who may have permanent residence or dual citizenship. APEC cards not currently accepted for entry, but the quarantine is only for 6 days, so that's something. Work from home is still very much in place in the Philippines, and business is still heavily restricted in terms of movement and access. We've just about wrapped up a long-running matter in the Philippines, working with our associates there to support us. It was much more complicated than usual due to the COVID restrictions, and a lot of angst and interruptions were experienced in trying to deliver the expected high standard of result for the client. We frequently had to find urgent workarounds and new ways of doing things, but being flexible and agile and taking the client on the journey with us delivered good results in the end. Cambodia has managed COVID extremely well so far, and apart from a minor spike this week, is almost COVID-free. There's no visas being issued other than for humanitarian aid or government and specialist requirements. APEC cards are not accepted anyway in Cambodia. 14-day quarantine is required. Day-to-day business is not impacted in Cambodia with no restrictions on movements. Laos, or Lao, remains closed. You can forget it, and investigations are illegal in Laos anyway. Myanmar has more than just COVID to worry about, with the military taking control of the country again this month. But it's been almost impossible since March, April to enter Myanmar. There's no visas being issued and special permission is required from an offshore mission. APEC cards also not recognised in Myanmar, and there is a 7-day quarantine. The country is more or less in lockdown, or at least heavy movement control, not necessarily related to the military action. People are allowed to travel to and from work and shop at local markets, but they risk detention for non-essential travel or movement across the country, or even in the cities. There's a nationwide curfew in place at the moment from 12 midnight until 4 a.m. and this may change as the protests, etc., continue there. So there it is. Across Southeast Asia and China, there's very limited opportunities to enter any country, with visas generally not being issued and APEC card users limited. The good news is that there is little internal restriction for businesses to operate in China, Cambodia, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. So we've been able to get on with investigations and due diligence matters, at least in those countries. In all other locations, it's problematic and may change quickly as governments continue to scramble to contain outbreaks of COVID. The vaccines are rolling out in most countries, some quicker than others, but realistically, we should not expect much, if anything, to change this calendar year for cross-border travel, at least without quarantine and extensive PCR and other testing. So, thanks for listening. You'll find our updates here on LinkedIn or through our website, aegisinteractiveasia.com or businessmobilityasia.com, as well as on our Facebook page, our Twitter account, and on our YouTube channel.